So here's part 3 of my interview with Stephan Cizmar, an early stage investor and tech veteran. And at what point did you become a hiring manager? Just overall.
It's an interesting question. I was in like classic startup fashion, I was like haphazardly thrown into it,
Yeah.
where I started doing a lot of this work on biz ops and research. Um, and all of a sudden I then owned it. Um, and I remember it was within the first 10 months that happened. And it was a very fast transition. And
Uh,
I remember Brian, one of the co-founders telling me that they just hired a chief strategy officer, who does to this day is one of my great mentors, Mark Ferrantino. Um, and that I would go work under him. And that was really all. Like I didn't get the title change, a compensation change. I literally went from doing a side project to then owning that side project to then that side project becoming its own department, in like a matter of like 20 days.
wow.
Um, and so I think a lot of my leadership practices, to be frank with you, Jason, were learned the hard way. Um, but a lot of how I constructed my leadership philosophy has been a combination of what I've seen the best leaders that I personally had exposure to do, combined with my leadership idols, like people who I've never met, but I've absorbed and read all of their content or as much content as I can. And I think there's also a flip side to it that oftentimes you won't hear in management principles, but a lot of also what I learned about leadership, especially being in this trial by fire role, was adopting principles and processes and techniques that I saw other leaders not do. And basically taking almost inspiration from my best managers, but also my worst managers, and coupling that together to create an archetype that I saw or what I perceived to be effective. And of course, there was growing pains along the way. But ultimately, what that landed on is that leadership style right now was greatly impacted by those formidable years, where I believe in a fast moving, high output organization that's meritocratic, where you put individuals in the best positions that they can succeed with an eye towards growth. And what I mean by that is that growth is not comfortable by any means. Growth is not something that's pleasant where you're doing something that's always in your skill set. It's you have to be uncomfortable and you have to experience a little bit of setback in order to basically grow and mature as an individual operator. But the best leaders, what I've found, and this is how I model my own leadership, are the ones who are able to facilitate those growth moments and also at the same time foster environments that bring the best out of people and understand how to communicate with their employees, not as employees themselves, but as humans and as individuals. That takes an understanding of the individuals that you're managing, deeper than them being an asset to the company that you're working at.
Right. And at what point did you start transitioning from being an individual contributor to helping organizations hire great people? And how did you translate the lessons that you learned as an operator into then being the person to hire these great operators?
I think it started again during my time at Yext, where
Yeah. The,
I had to grow a team. I was involved a lot of recruiting and interview processes for other teams that I didn't directly manage,
mm-hmm.
but as a checkpoint for it. And I think I developed during that time a qualitative screen of what made for an effective operator within a startup context. Ultimately, I think when you're moving in an environment that's very chaotic, uncertain, and fast paced, grit and tenacity are really the two most important traits. And over again, resume credentials academic background. Um, but you have to couple that with an effective ability to communicate. Because ultimately,
Mhm.
what I learned is that as I've risen the ranks of leadership,
Mhm.
whether you're a CTO, whether you're a chief product officer, a CRO, a CEO of a company, you're always communicating to stakeholders a consistent vision, or a vision that should be ideally consistent, um, that's articulated in an efficient manner where they understand and resonate with that message itself. And so, effective communication I've seen is that one of the most critical traits for leadership, um, and that extends down into the individual contributor level. Because ultimately, when you're hiring in a startup, you're not just thinking about the role that an individual can contribute, you're thinking about the long term potential of that individual contributing to the growth and trajectory of that company, not just within the role themselves, but as a contributor and as a human, as part of a joining a group of other people aligned to a mission. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway I had from that period. And that's something that translated well, I would say, into my career as an investor when working with Blackhorn, um, the firm that I'm a partner in, or Lorimer, the operator syndicate that I manage as well. When placing a hire into a company, a lot of my screening criteria comes from my experience from hiring hundreds of people, during my time as a founder and an operator scaling these companies. Um, and I think a lot of the way that I now, as an investor and a board member, work with founders is really as a thought partner for them to develop the narrative that they want to pitch to their employees, the roadmap that they're cultivating, and also how they position their company to the greater market and the investor community itself. Um, and a lot of that, honestly, Jason, is bottling up the mistakes I made
Mhm.
and helping them. And the process of help is much different on this side of the world than an operator world, where as a board member, I won't tell you that, oh, your VP of product is not good. But what I've found is a way to really collaborate as a thought partner with the management team where I'll go out and have set up interviews, again,
Mhm.
using my network with three other VPs of product, show that to the founder. And then oftentimes what happens is that that's a much more efficient way of setting a tone, being like, hey, we need to up level this position. They'll come back to me. He or she will come back to me and say, you know what? I think we need to hire
Right.
for this role, as opposed to me being forceful in that way. I think what I've learned, and this again comes from the my mentors and idols in the VC world, is that there's a way to tactfully be a thought partner and guide where you don't have to be abrasive and control oriented, but you could still essentially look out for the best interests of a company and most importantly, the people that you're backing as an investor. Um, as a quick aside, I think the most important part of the investing business is understanding the human dynamic, and it's understanding founder market fit, it's understanding grit of the early stage team, it's understanding communication principles. Um, and ultimately, if that group of individuals are right for the market and the solution that they're building, and if they can effectively convey a mission that attracts top talent, investors, and ultimately customers to their concept.
And last question is, what advice would you have for recent college graduates who might want to get to where you are today, but have no idea where to start?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I would just say you miss every opportunity that you don't take, especially at that age. Be opportunistic, hit
Mhm.
coffee meetings, reach out to people in your network, leverage your career center. I think there's so much that people take for granted or leave up to chance, when in reality there's a lot that you could do to impact or manifest your own destiny, the first step is really just taking initiative, um, and being rigorous about it. Like if you're looking to break into tech and you have a limited network and you're graduating, let's say this spring, my unsolicited and open advice to you is set aside maybe an hour each day where you're crafting messages to people in your network, and an hour before or after where you're doing research on the type of company you want to go into, what the investors are that are on that cap table. And especially in today's environment where there's such a wealth of information, it's even much different than when I was breaking in. Companies have YouTube channels dedicated to how their product's being used. There's customer testimonials, there's review sites, there's Glassdoor. We could look about the culture of a company itself. LinkedIn, where you could basically see who's second or third degree connections to people that you want to, companies that you're interested in. In short, take the initiative. I tell this to founders that we back all the time. The victory is not the financial outcome. It's not the outcome of where the company is. That's great. If you have a big exit, if you're an IPO or you navigate a company to some sort of high scale. But what's most important and where the victory actually lies is taking that initiative. It's putting your best effort out there, regardless of the outcome. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you put that best effort out there, while the outcome might not be what you intended, you still can't say that you didn't try. And you're still taking that initiative. And the reality is that that initiative that you're putting forward will yield opportunities that you can't foresee today.
Right. Those are some great points. And there's also no downside to try. I think a lot of people, especially when you're a recent college graduate, there's like nothing to lose from reaching out. You are going to be where you started if you don't do anything. And the downside of not doing anything and doing something, they're the same. So
it goes back ultimately to the spectrum that we opened with, where if you could rationalize the worst thing happening, particularly on outreach, is you don't get a response.
Right.
The best thing that happens is maybe you get a connection that ultimately leads you to somewhere. Let's say a place that could be your first starting out of your career,
right,
or a connection that gets you to somewhere you want to go. If you could basically be okay with both outcomes, it's very likely that something will happen in the middle.
And you don't know what you don't know. That's
exactly
also something that you don't know what possibilities, you can't even define the number of possibilities that are out there, especially early on. And you just never know where an opportunity might take you.
Well said, my friend.
Thank you so much for your time, Stephan. This is really insightful. I know we didn't touch on Uncork or Lang AI, but I really wanted to focus on what made you who you are today based on your early years. And I think we all had a pretty good understanding of how you got to where you're at today.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate the time. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Looking forward to continuing the conversation soon.
Thanks again, Stephan.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. So I hope you enjoyed my interview with Stephan Cizmar. Stay tuned for more interviews.